Along with this, Moses' father's not mentioned much in this story. His mother's got a place of prominence. He spent time in the wilderness, as did Jesus. This is the big one. He came to lead people to an exodus, to a new beginning. And that's the real correlation. This story of Moses and Exodus is the foundational text for the Jewish people. And really for us. It's really hard for us to understand our faith if we don't understand this story. So we're going to spend a few weeks here diving into this story, because this is the big story in a lot of ways that we need to know if we're going to understand Jesus rightly. Because when we understand Jesus, Jesus saw himself as the new Moses coming to lead people to a new exodus. Moses' exodus is from who? Egypt, who was the most powerful nation on the face of the earth. Jesus comes to lead an exodus from sin, death, and the devil. An even bigger deal, but their stories parallel quite a bit. Now it's interesting, when I was reading about Exodus from the Jewish man in this, he pointed out that the Jewish people don't call this Exodus. We call it Exodus, which means what? We kind of can tell the word. Exodus really means exit from Egypt. The Jewish people, does anybody know what they call it? They call it the Book of Names. It's very interesting. I'm pretty intrigued by that. We're going to talk about why that makes sense today. The book of Names. And he said that, and I didn't look this up, but I trust him. If you look it up in the Hebrew, the first word in the book of Exodus, let's open our Bibles to Exodus chapter 1. See, somebody read the first word. What's the first word in Exodus for you? These, okay. Yeah. These are the names of the sons of Israel. So in Hebrew, the first word is and. And he makes the case that Exodus is very much the sequel of Genesis, that the story is just continuing. I knocked it over, but it seems like the lid's holding good. So the first word in Hebrew is and. So this is a continuation, definitely much a sequel. The whole thing is a story. And then you can tell that without even knowing the word and, because what does it do? It lists the names. This is why I think it's called Names in a lot of ways. There's maybe a number of reasons, but the first thing is the names of the son of Israel, and it lists the sons of Jacob, this family, and we start to see a lot of callbacks. You're going to see there's a lot of them that are hidden. There's a lot of callbacks to Genesis. And first is this listing of Jacob's family. And then the second callback should be pretty obvious, hopefully, if you've read Genesis. It's in Exodus chapter 1, verse 7, where it says, "But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly, increased in number, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them." What's that a callback to? Any ideas? The Garden of Eden, yep. And the first command, what's the first command the people are given? Is to be fruitful and to multiply. So it's the same idea that the people of Israel were fulfilling God's command. They were being fruitful and multiplying, but instead of it being a good thing, for the Egyptians, it was a fearful thing. It was a scary thing. Now, if you look at Exodus chapter 1 and have read it, as we think about the book of names, the people of Jacob were named, but who else is named in Genesis chapter 1 or in Exodus chapter 1? Who is named and who goes unnamed? You just look at that, and I'm going to write a couple things. Anybody have an answer? Who's named? The midwives are named. There's 2 women that are named, and that's it, right? Nobody else is named. So you have these 2 women, Shiphrah. She might have said it differently. That's how I'm going to say it. And Puah. Now, they are midwives. It's interesting. I always kind of thought of them as Hebrew, but one of the commentaries I was reading making the case that they're most likely Egyptian women that were midwives to the Hebrews. It seemed like they didn't have any babies because it mentions in the text that they were given families at the end of this. So they are women low on the totem pole who are named. And then who's the most interesting character that's unnamed? It's Pharaoh, the king. Pharaoh of the most powerful nation. This is when the pyramids were being built, all this stuff. Now this drives people crazy because if you study it, there's all kinds of books and stuff written on who was Pharaoh at this time, because we know them all, because they put their likeness and their names everywhere. They built these huge tombs. They were famous. They're still famous to this day. We know like King Tut and Ramses and all these pharaohs, but the Bible doesn't name them. Why? We don't really know, but I think most scholars would say this. It's a sign of disrespect. It's a little thumb in the nose at them. Like the pharaohs believed in gods, but they also believed what? That they were a god. I am God. I have all the power. In Exodus, they don't even name the pharaoh because this is a huge question. Who is God? That's what this whole book is really, really about. For Moses, this is the question we're going to talk about tonight. Who am I? That's a question you and I have to answer every day too. Who am I? But then the big question of the book is who is God? This is not a battle between Israel and Pharaoh or Moses and Pharaoh. This whole book is a battle between Pharaoh and God. Now, why? One of the things, if you read it carefully, if you read the text, next week we're going to read like chapter 6 to chapter maybe close to 20. You're going to see this. You're going to see things. Again, if you see things over and over and over, you should write them down or underline them and mark them. But you're going to see this. It's going to say, I want the world to know who is God. Remember the original blessing in Genesis 12. This people is going to bless the world. One of the ways this is going to happen is that when this nation, who's a nation of slaves, walks out of Egypt without lifting a finger, the whole world's going to hear this story, and they're going to know who is God. So that seems to be one of the reasons that this nation ended up in Israel, is that God wants the world to know who he is, and God wants the world to follow him. And so here right away we see this battle being set up by the pharaohs not even being named. Now the midwives are named, these lowly women. Who is Pharaoh afraid of in this story? Who's Pharaoh afraid of? He's afraid of the Israelites, but which particular part of the Israelites? Doesn't say it explicitly, but who's he? If he's afraid of the people that he's trying to kill. So who's he trying to kill? Boys, yes. Especially, he narrows down to baby boys. Why? Doesn't say, but we can take a pretty logical guess. What baby boys grow up to be what? Teenagers with some strength and some athleticism and can fight. He says that I'm afraid that if we get attacked, that the men of Israel are going to join and grab spears and we're going to be weak from the inside. So he's afraid of the baby boys. So he tries 3 things. First, he tries to oppress them and to make them so tired that they won't procreate, that they won't have babies. But that doesn't work. And then he tells the midwives to kill the baby boys. He tells them to do this awful thing. And the midwives don't. They come up with a very clever but a very courageous lie. Now people will say, well, isn't lying wrong? Well, clearly in the Bible, not always. If you think about lying, I would just say it this way succinctly. Lying is wrong when it deceives others to benefit yourself. That's a lot of the time we lie. We lie to deceive others to benefit ourselves. The midwives weren't doing that at all. These were most likely Egyptian women who had nothing to lose by killing babies, but they lied. Lying is okay when it puts yourself at risk to benefit others. They were putting themselves at great risk for the full benefit of other people. And so they thwart the plan of Pharaoh. And the third thing is, what does it say at the end of the verse? It's really dark. In verse 22 of Exodus 1, then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile. Let every girl live. Infanticide. He told his people to kill babies. Now we can imagine how brutal that is. Did that happen? Probably. Like, if you don't obey Pharaoh, you die. So you should imagine like the depth of the darkness of this. Like people coming and ripping away babies from crying moms and dads and taking them and tossing them and splashing them into a river. It's brutal. It's dark. It's evil. And against this backdrop of this evil, Moses is born. Again, Jesus is born into a very, very similar circumstance, this really tragic darkness. Now, Moses' mom and Moses' sister is not named in the story either until later. Later on, we find their name is Miriam and Jochebed. Why aren't they named now? Interesting question. Again, the text doesn't say. Carmen Imes in her video said, well, Miriam and Jochebed are like, they're the oppressed ones. They're behind the scenes trying to be sneaky. They're trying to hide Moses as long as they can. And so it seems like the narrator's like, shh, like, don't say their names. Like they're operating behind the curtain, and they're being subversive and behind the scenes. And so at this point, the narrator quiets down and doesn't say their name. Now, there's some callbacks to Genesis that we lose in the English text, in most Bibles anyway. Look at Exodus 2:2. It says this: and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 weeks. What does that mean? Well, every mom, when you have a baby, like, it's your child. Like, it's such a powerful experience. I don't know why they say fine there. I wish they wouldn't. It's the word tov there. It's the word good. I don't know if you have the one that says tov. I just want to show you I'm not lying. It's a callback to Genesis, the creation, and it is good. It's a good child. It's a tov child, and so she's going to risk her life to protect her child. It's creation language. Then in Exodus 2:3, this is even cooler if you read this. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Now, does your Bible say basket? Does anybody's Bible say something different? Basket isn't a terrible translation. I don't know why they do this. The actual word, Rachel will put this one up as well. The actual word is ark. It's the same word. She puts him in an ark. It's a callback to Genesis. That's all. Again, you're going to see these stories keep repeating themselves. She makes an ark. Remember the flood story. The waters are chaos. The Egyptians are supposed to throw these babies into chaos, into a place of death. And in Genesis, Noah and his family are in this ark where they survive the chaos. And so Miriam does the same thing. She makes an ark. The only time this Hebrew word is used is here and in the flood story. It's supposed to connect the dots to both stories. And so the Hebrew babies are supposed to be thrown into the water of chaos and death, and Moses is saved just like Noah. Now in Exodus chapter 2, if you read it, there's a word that's emphasized a lot. Now again, in English, we'll lose it some because we'll use different words. But the word that's used a lot is the word saw. You're going to see throughout the Bible is this question: do you have ears to hear and eyes to see? Ears to hear and eyes to see. It's going to start appearing all the time. And in Exodus 2, you're going to see a lot of people that saw things. And the one that sees the most is God. Sometimes your Bible will translate it look, or a lot of times it'll be seen, or it'll be saw, but it's all the same. It's all the same Hebrew word. And we see it especially in Exodus 2, verse 6. So let's back up. Jochebed, the mom, I think it was Kenny's question, like, did she know that somebody would see this baby? I would imagine she had a lot of strategy. I imagine she knew that this princess or this daughter of Pharaoh bathed in this certain spot. There's another play on words here that Miriam or Jochebed put Moses in the reeds. Now, in the Bible, we often hear of the Red Sea that they walked through. Well, in Hebrew, it's not the Red Sea. It's always the Sea of Reeds. So they put Moses in the reeds. One day, Moses is going to lead the people through the Sea of Reeds to freedom. But Jochebed put Moses in the reeds to save him. And this Hebrew, this Egyptian daughter of Pharaoh comes, and she hears the crying, and she tells her servant to go get the child. And what does it say in Exodus 2, verse 6? She opened it and saw the baby. First of all, it says she saw the basket amongst the reeds, and then she saw the baby, and he was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies. She's the daughter of Pharaoh. She knows what she's supposed to do. Take the baby, throw him in the river. But she doesn't. She has pity on him. Now, this should all call us back to remember the story of Hagar, who got sent away by Abraham and Sarah. And God saw Hagar, and Hagar was the first one to name God. And what did she name God? She named God El Roi, the one who sees. Hagar, who was a maidservant, not an Israelite, understood who God was. And now here we see the Pharaoh's daughter demonstrating God's qualities. In a little bit, we're going to get to Exodus 34:6. A really important passage, one of the most important passages in the Bible. It's a list where God finally says who he is. And in the Hebrew language, in the whole Bible, a list is really important. What's first, what's second, what's third? What's the first thing God says about him? What's the most important thing about me? In your Bible in Exodus 34:6, it might say mercy. It's the same, I think mercy is a good translation, but so is compassion. What does it say in the NIV? It probably says mercy in the NIV, Exodus 34:6. Does it say compassion? Compassion and gracious, yeah. Compassion is the first thing. What does Paul say? I forget, I think it's in one of the Timothys. He says, God is the father of compassion. If you look up the word compassion in the Hebrew, I didn't write down the name of the word, but it's a word that is about how a woman feels about her baby in the womb. If you've been with me a while, I say that over and over. Because again, is God male? Is God female? God's non-gendered. He's human. And women and men fully image God. And it says, the best way to understand the biggest quality about God? Moms that have babies in the womb, how that feels. And women are the only ones that know that. But how that feels, that's how God feels. And this daughter of Pharaoh was demonstrating God's quality when she opened that basket and really birthed Moses and gave Moses a chance at life. Now, I think in your handout, you have this Aikido. Did I write that in the handout? So that's from, did I write that or not? Did I write something different? Yeah, you can pull up the slide. So we talked about how God takes evil things and reverses them. I showed you a clip of basketball because Aikido is this Japanese Taekwondo thing where somebody strikes you with aggression and you use that strike against them to defeat them. We see this all play out in this story. Pharaoh wishes to counter God's plan by throwing infants in the Nile, and God saves Moses when Jochebed casts him into the Nile. Moses is trying to make a move to kill all the boys, and God saves Moses by bringing him right to the front door of the palace. Egypt thinks men are the threat to be eliminated, and who defeats Pharaoh? It's the women. The women, even in his own house, are the ones who defeat him. Pharaoh has no compassion. His daughter demonstrates God's compassion in a beautiful way. Egypt casts babies into the Nile, and the end of the story, the Egyptian army is going to be drowned in the sea of reeds. And so So we see this daughter of Pharaoh named Moses. But one of the things I want to really highlight is that the beginning of this story is very intentional. Women are the hero of the story. We should notice that. The ones who are overlooked are the ones who defeat Pharaoh. Shiphrah, Puah, Miriam, Jochebed, Pharaoh's daughter, they all combine to defeat Pharaoh. Let's pause to remember Genesis 2:18. Remember that verse? It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable to him. Pastor Rachel preached about it. We talked about it here. Helper is not some second-class citizen. The Israelites needed help. They were in a really bad spot, as was Adam when he was alone. And Eve came, and here the women came and destroyed Pharaoh's plan. I've been reading the lectionary text for Advent, and the lectionary had me read Psalms 124 for the last 3 or 4 days. And Psalms 124 ends with this: our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Throughout the Old Testament, the one who helps is God, but God uses his people, and here we see 5 women help, not by washing the dishes or cleaning or any secondary role, but by doing amazing, courageous things to defeat the most powerful man in the world at the time. And so God comes to help, and God uses women in the story to help in a powerful way. And we should make sure to pause and to notice that. All right, I'm going to keep going. If there's any questions, I'll give you a second here. All right, now, who names Moses? It's interesting, Moses doesn't have a name yet. He's been alive for months. We don't have a name. I would imagine Jochebed, his mom, named him, but we don't know what name she chose, because who names Moses? Pharaoh's daughter names Moses, and she names him Moses. Now, Moses is an interesting name. Moses, there's a word in Hebrew that sounds like Moses, so it would be interesting that the Egyptian person would use a Hebrew word, but there's also an Egyptian word that sounds like Moses. So what does the Hebrew word that sounds like Moses means to draw out? Which makes sense because Moses got drawn out of the Nile. And what's he going to do? He's going to draw out his people from Egypt to freedom. The Egyptian word means what? The Egyptian word that sounds like Moses means son of, which is probably what she meant. That's her son now. But then again, this is the big question for Moses and for all of us. Who am I? Who am I? Moses was born an Israelite, but he was raised from infancy in the palace as Egyptian royalty. You read the story, it's super creative and innovative, but it's super sad. Right? When Moses gets drawn out, his sister is there watching and waiting. And when she sees the compassion, she goes, and this brilliant plan is like, hey, do you need somebody to nurse the baby? And she's like, yeah. And so then Moses' real mom gets paid to raise the baby that's supposed to be executed. It's brilliant. But then there's a really sad line. I don't know what verse it is. I didn't write it down, but you can read it. Because when Moses was at a certain age, when he was weaned, Jochebed had to take him and give him to this daughter of the Pharaoh and to put him in the palace. You can imagine the tears and the weeping and the gnashing of teeth when that happened. Like, again, we need to push into the trauma of this story. So much trauma for Moses' mom, but also for Moses. He's adopted and he's put into this house as an Israelite, but now he's going to grow up as an Egyptian, but not only an Egyptian, like a privileged, rich, powerful Egyptian.
We'll never know, but it wasn't like her dad and people around, like, hey, where does this baby come from?
Yeah, we don't know. It's a great story. I put on the backside of the commentaries a bunch of questions, and there are questions that came up in this class, a lot from Jeff here, I know. But yeah, like, didn't the dad see this? We don't know. I mean, you know, again, like, I'm a daughter. I have daughters. I'm a dad of daughters. Did she like bat her eyes and say, "Daddy, this is mine. Like, don't do anything to this"? It could have, Most likely, it wasn't a very healthy family and situation, and there was tons of people there, and maybe she somehow hid him. He looked like when she saw him, she knew he was a Hebrew. He looked different. We don't know how that happened, but somehow she pulled it off. Yep.
Do you know what a Hebrew looks like? And I wonder, like, are they different skin color? You know, like, because
Yeah.
Hebrews are supposed to be like recognizable somehow, from my understanding. But
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to my college education in the early mid-90s, so that's going to be a while ago. Yeah, I mean, like any people group starts to kind of like, they became numerous, but they were all kind of intermarrying, so you kind of have a certain look. I don't know exactly what that was. They found a tomb that they think was the tomb of Joseph, and they had a statue of this person, and the way his hair was cut seemed like that was like what they would have said in archaeology, a Hebrew hairdo, so to speak. But as a baby, yeah, I would think it would be facial features, skin tone. Maybe it was close enough she could hide him and dress him up and make him look more Egyptian. But this was a different people group, and so they were going to look a little different. Not necessarily sure. I'm sure there's some writings and some guesses on what that would have been. Like, were they darker? Were they lighter? I don't know. Yeah, we don't know how Moses got raised in the palace. Now, it's interesting because of this question, who am I? Look at verse 11. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were. So the story is telling him who he is. You're an Israelite. And watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. And looking this way and that way and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So the Bible's telling us who he is. But as we read the story, it seems like Moses isn't for sure who he is. It makes sense that he's going to be very confused. Here's a few things we know about Moses. He was born into oppression. Moses experienced great injustice. And Moses is going to demonstrate that injustice angers him. All through his life, when he runs into something that's wrong, he gets really mad, including here. There was a clear injustice, and Moses went too far. He killed the guy. But his whole story, he's going to struggle with anger, and he's going to struggle with when things aren't right. But his whole story was injustice. He got ripped from his parents and raised in this palace. And so next thing is that Moses goes to break up a fight between two Israelites. And look at what happened here. Verse 14. The man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, what I did must have become known. So here he's kind of rejected by his own people. Like, who are you? You're not one of us. Who made you king over us? You're the Egyptian in the palace. And so I think in your handout I have three themes of Moses' life. A sense of justice, right and wrong, and a compassion for those who are wronged. So he has a sense of justice and a compassion for those who are wronged. He has anger issues. He has a hard time controlling his anger, and his people will reject him and God continually. Here's the first instance of Moses facing rejection. He's going to face rejection from his own people continually. So Moses then flees because he knows that the murder is not a secret, and so he flees to the wilderness to a country called Midian. And what happens when he's at Midian? He goes to a well. Well is where water is, and there's a man who has, I think, 7 daughters, and they all come, and some guys are very mean to the daughters and drive them off. And what does that trigger in Moses? It's not right what's happening to these women, and I'm mad, and he defends them, and he gets them water. Now, this is another callback to Genesis because Jacob and Isaac, they met their wives at a well. In the ancient world, it seems you don't go to the bar, or you don't go on Tinder or on the internet. You go to the well to find your wife. That's where people are. And so he saves these women, and because of that, he's welcomed into their house, and Zipporah is given to him as his wife. Now look at Exodus 2:22. This tells you how Moses thinks about his life. His life has been brutal, really. Exodus 2:22, he names his son. And what does he name? Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. That's who he is. This is the question. We're going to finish here soon. Is Moses a Hebrew? Is Moses an Egyptian? Is Moses a Midianite? In some way, he could answer yes to all of those questions. Who tells you who you are? Is it your circumstances? Is it your family? Is it your nation? Is it your skills, your abilities? Or is it God? Moses doesn't know who he is. We're going to kind of skip, because of time, the whole burning bush story. We'll cover that next week, and we'll see how far we get. Let's just go to the end of the story. Let's go to a really weird part of the story. Moses meets God, and God convinces him to go back. Now think about Moses. Just think about this. He is uniquely positioned to save his people. When you're raised in the palace, what do you learn? You learn the ways of the palace, right? You learn how power works and how that whole thing works. He probably learned Egyptian. Like, one question, Moses says, I'm not good at talking. And was he saying really like, my Egyptian isn't great? It's been a lot of years since I've spoke Egyptian. But he knew how the palace was. He was a Hebrew. He was uniquely positioned for this job. But he doesn't know who he is. He's experienced so much. And so he's finally convinced to go back. And there's this really interesting verse in chapter 4. Let's go to chapter 4, and it's chapter 4, verse 24 to 26. So he's going back, and then you hear this really weird verse. He says, at a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it. Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me, she said. So the Lord let him alone. At that time, she said, bridegroom of blood, referring to circumcision. So that gives us a good clue to the meaning. What in the world is going on here? Right? What's going on? Well, the text doesn't tell us per se, but that last thing in parentheses gives us a good clue. So this is what I think, and the scholars I read are pretty sure what's going on. Moses, when you read Exodus 3 and 4, you'll get a lot of language of what does God say? I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God talks about the covenant, the promise I have made. I think it's Genesis 15 or so. What's the sign of the covenant for the Israelite people and God? It's circumcision. It's a reminder that God was faithful and brought Abraham and Sarah a child, and we're covenant partners. So it's clear here that Moses never circumcised his kids. Well, what does that mean? That means he doesn't think he's an Israelite or a Hebrew. He doesn't know who he is. Is he a Midianite? Is he an Egyptian? Is he a Hebrew? Moses doesn't know. Who comes to the rescue for Moses? His wife. Another common theme. The culture of the ancient world pushed women down, down, down. Our culture still does. Part of what I want you to see throughout this whole story is the Bible elevate. It doesn't elevate women above men, like Moses was a great man, but Zipporah was a great woman. You see heroes of both genders. Zipporah, being a Midianite, somehow knew what was going on. And Moses, it seems like, was confused and not for sure who he was. And so Moses, it says here, Zipporah took a flint knife and cut off her son's foreskin. She circumcised him and touched Moses' feet with it. Now, throughout the Old Testament, it doesn't like to use the word for male genitalia. Feet is often, I'll show you other examples, but feet is often a synonym for male genitalia. So it wasn't his foot that she touched. It was his circumcised penis is what she touched. And so, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. She was faithful to the covenant. This is very disconcerting that God was coming to kill. I'm disconcerted by that. But it seems like this was the whole story of saying, Moses, who are you? you're a Hebrew. You're a son of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You're somebody that God sees and that God knows. You're somebody that's had a very traumatic story, but because all the pain in your life, which for a lot of you is true, the pain in your life has uniquely positioned you to do a lot of good in the world. Who knows how to come alongside a people group who's been through so much trauma, except for Moses, who's been through so much trauma? All the trauma in your life that you've been through, that uniquely positions you to be good into people's lives. And so Zipporah seems to claim Moses' identity and to say, Moses, you are a Hebrew. You are one of God's. And it's going to take Moses a while to really claim that. But that's his big question. Who am I? And it's the big question for all of us. Who are we? So I want to close with this, and then we'll pray and we'll jump into some questions. It's a lot of the story that we skipped. I just want us to write down on this board so we see it who God says we are. Because again, we can get defined easily by the world, by our family, by our nation, by our skills, by our abilities. We find our self-worth in a lot of things. But let's just list off some things as we think about the New Testament. Well, who does God say that we are?
Created in his image.
Yes. All right, others. Yes. So we think about adoption, Moses, like we are sons and daughters. Beloved sons and daughters. Other things, fire, there's a lot of them. We know these. Okay, yep, caretakers. Chosen, yeah. What did you say? We're a new creation. Yeah, we've been made new. This is another way really to say forgiven, which is another way to say made holy. We are deeply loved. God is delighted to be with you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have to know, like, yeah, we are sinners, but this is a part of, like, we're forgiven sinners. Yeah. We have to realize that all these are true only by the grace of God, not by anything we have done. We're welcomed at his table. We're cleansed, purified. Now, it often doesn't feel like these things are true.
We're of the planet, right?
Yeah, we're created in his image. We're God's creation. We're God's masterpiece. It often feels like, we're humans that don't measure up and don't meet the earth's standard of beauty. But that's, again, we're trying to measure ourselves against what God thinks, not what we think. Moses didn't know who we are. A lot of us, we don't feel this every day. It takes faith to believe this, but the Bible from cover to cover is going to scream, this is the story. That you're way more important than you think you are, that the God of the universe knows you. The two things. He knows you and sees you. He has compassion for you. He understands your pain. All of those things often can feel untrue, as they did for Moses. I'll finish with 1 Peter 2:9. You are a chosen people, Peter writes. Now, Peter's writing to people who got kicked out of Rome because they were Jewish Christians and sent, if you know where Rome is in Italy, they were sent to the north part of modern-day Turkey, and they were relocated, like Moses was. And he tells these people who are living kind of in fear, relocated, abandoned by the Roman government, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. We'll pray and then we'll take some questions. God, I thank you for this wonderful story. Thank you for these faithful women that are highlighted in this story that stood up courageously. We pray that as we have people even around us that are often oppressed or shunned or treated poorly, that you would give us courage to step up and to defend those who need defending, to bring life to those whose life might be threatened. God, I pray that as we get told different things by the world and by our own story, even like I know people in this room have been told really negative things by their own families, that those things are all lies and are not true. That as Moses struggled with who he is, we do too. And we need to be reminded and have faith that we are deeply loved, that we are forgiven, that we're created in your image, that we are children of the Most High God, that we are a unique, once only masterpieces of the God of the universe. God, I thank you that you know us and that you see us. And God, help us to live as your children. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so if you want to go, feel free. If we have questions, we skipped over a lot of the story with the burning bush, which we can talk about now if you have questions, but we'll get back to next week because it's an important part of this story. Yes, Ben.
In regards to like what we are,
Mm-hmm.
would it be safe to say we are bride
Yeah.
and or Israel?
No, that's very safe to say. The Bible is very clear, like this, we're covenant partners, which in the New Testament would be the language of bride and groom. We are the bride of Christ. You know, we think sexually that gets really weird. We're not supposed to think that way. But this idea of like we're together in this, we're partners. Yeah. So, no, that's very good. Right.
But not Israel?
Israel, I think, has a special relationship with God, the Jewish people, not the nation of Israel per se, but the Jewish people. I think there's the first four covenants are about them. The fifth covenant is about us, like the new covenant where is open to everybody. So, yeah, I think the covenant to Abraham, the covenant to David, there's still an importance there, a unique relationship with God. So I think there's, a lot of people that are Jewish can also be a part of the new covenant. They can see Jesus as the Messiah. Some do, but not all. But yeah.
It seems odd that a Pharaoh was killing boys because they were meant to grow up to be men, and then the men would do the labor for the work. So it seems odd that he would kill off his labor force.
Yeah, it seemed like he was just more fearful at that point of
Probably more fearful than overtaking.
right. Yeah, I mean it is. You kind of are like it is your labor force as well, but yeah, he seemed like mostly fearful of using that. There's so many that they could.
The Pharaoh says, "Oh, hey, look at these people. They're like growing and growing, and they're multiplying.
Mhm.
Well, were they multiplying because God gave them the commandment to do? I mean, why wasn't the Pharaoh people multiplying and multiplying? Why weren't they keeping up with the childbearing years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was going to talk about this tonight and didn't have time. I think we don't know, but I think overall, like people in power are, especially in the ancient world, but they always are even now. They're very insecure and they're always watching their back. Like I would say, like if you were probably doing a census, there was way more Egyptians than Israelites. Like, but you're always just so worried that something bad's going to happen, that someone's always coming to get you. Like the ancient kings always had somebody taste their food because someone's poisoning me. Like someone's always, and even in Washington, D.C., like everybody's after everybody, So I think it's an exaggeration it's also like very true. Like the Israelite people came to Israel as refugees, but kind of as very welcomed. But then the tables flipped. They were foreigners. And foreigners are in every country are always at very high risk. It's always, if you look at the history, I'm just reading a book on all the immigrants in the United States, and they're always at the bottom, and they're really at risk to be targeted. And so we're not looking at politics, Republican, Democrat. We try to stay away from that, and like we read the Bible as we live our lives. But we know like that's happening now. It's complicated with immigrants and refugees, but leaders always are fearful of them and can point to them and to have everybody kind of unite against them. And it's a common story over and over and over. And it's what's happening here. I would say it's very exaggerated most likely, but that's how rulers always are. And so we can, without trying to get too political, like we're dealing with it right now. Like, and how do we do it as Christians? That's the question we ask. You'll see in one part of this, again, like this nation of God is starting at the bottom. When you read the story, if you read Leviticus, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, it will say over and over, remember you are foreigners, remember you are slaves, so that when you have foreigners in your land, you treat them well. It's going to say that over and over. Remember how you started, so that when you have your land and foreigners come into them, you treat them well. And the Israelites won't. They won't remember. Because once you have comfort and power, your only goal is to keep it. Most times as people. As Christians, we should be different. I was going to look up how many times it says that, but over and over, remember you were once foreigners. I'll look it up for next week. It's a lot. So yeah, I think the fear is greatly exaggerated. But we don't get to take a census, and it's hard to know.
It says here that a priest welcomed Moses when he was the Midianites or something.
Yeah.
What type of a priest do you think he was?
Does it say Jethro was a priest? Probably. That's what you're talking about?
When Moses was at the well,
Yeah. the dad of the woman. Yeah, his name is Jethro. Yeah, he's the Midianites show up in the story a number of times. I had written down all the times that they had shown up. But he's going to be a priest of their religion, but
They're false gods.
yeah, but Jethro's a very wise man. He's going to show up a few times giving Moses very sage advice. So it's again like not putting people in a box, like Pharaoh's daughter demonstrated God's compassion. Jethro throughout the story is going to demonstrate God's wisdom. So we can put people in boxes of like, well, you're following a fault. Well, yeah, at some level probably, but Jethro also seemed to be like, again, what did he tell his daughters? Why was he mad at his daughters? It's like his daughter said, hey, this guy saved us and got us water. That's why we're back so early. And what does Jethro chew him out for? He's like, well, why don't you have hospitality? Well, throughout the whole Bible, hospitality is a huge part of being a Christian. Paul says in Romans 12, practice hospitality. So, yeah, wherever Jethro was, he was seeing some things, it seems in the story, quite clearly, even though you wouldn't expect him to. Somewhere, where does it say Jethro? It said, oh, it says Reuel is their father. Who's Jethro? Look that up, Rachel. If you could, please. Sorry, I don't mean to boss you around. Look that up.
I don't know. It says father-in-law of Moses.
Jethro?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jethro is introduced in the book of Exodus when Moses rescues his daughters at a well in Midian. Marries Zipporah.
I thought Jethro was his father-in-law, but here.
Known by other names,
Okay.
Reuel
Okay.
or Hobab.
Okay. So it is the same person. Okay. Yeah. They often have multiple names. But yeah, it would be interesting to read about how we know that. But later in the story, he's introduced as Jethro, I think. Yeah.
You mentioned parallels between Eve and Pharaoh's daughter. They both disobeyed with tremendous consequences.
Eve and Pharaoh's daughter?
Well, yeah, the picking of the apple
Okay.
and the not throwing Moses in. They both disobeyed.
Sure.
World consequences.
Sure.
Huge.
Right. One for bad and one for good. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe both for good.
Yeah.
We were free will, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
God knew that was going to happen, though, right?
He knew it was possible. Yeah. It's a really good question. Right. Yeah.
I mean, because if that wouldn't happen, this whole story would have played out the way it is.
Yeah, it would have played out differently. I mean, that's going to be the interesting part of God's sovereignty is an interesting question. Like, even in Exodus, pretty soon we're going to read a text where God is surprised. So how does that work? It's, yeah,
That's where I get kind of confused. Like, God all-knowing, all this and that
right.
stuff, you know, like.
Right. Dan has a good book for you to read about that, right, Dan? But it's kind of this question of like, does God know exactly what's going to happen, or does God know all? Like I think one of the arguments is God knows all the possibilities of what's going to happen, and if whatever happens, all the like there's so many different possibilities, but God might be big enough to know all of those. All I know for sure is in the text. I think we do have free will. I think there are times where God seems disappointed and surprised and like, why did you do that? Like that's kind of all over the Old Testament. So I just don't think it's very simple. I think it's kind of mysterious. And even the whole prophets, those that are very much into God's moving us like pawns, like the whole Old Testament and New Testament is the prophets yearning for the people to change their minds and to live differently. Like, please. God just keeps trying to woo the people to like, leave those gods and follow me. Please follow me. So, yeah.
If we had free will, then this book couldn't play out the way it has and will, right? Because everything's kind of set.
Well, in my view, now this disconcerts people, but I don't think everything is that set except for a few things. Like, Jesus will return and make all things right. There's a thing about predestination of like, we're getting into some New Testament stuff, but people will say like certain people are going to be in heaven and certain people are going to be in hell, and it's just all determined. So there's a few words. One is predestination, which I think is very easy, not very easy, but easier to explain than another word that I'm forgetting right now. But to say predestination means if you follow Jesus, what's going to happen is certain. So this isn't true. I wish it was, but I could say like, I got T-bone steaks at my house on the grill about to be done, and I'm going to invite you over. And if you say, yeah, I'll come over, I've predetermined that I've got T-bone steaks and potatoes and salad all ready to go. But if you reject it, it's not going to happen. And I think in the Greek words in the New Testament, there's one especially that's often translated predestination means that. It's not that God has predestined some to heaven and some to hell. It's that if he says no, yeah, I might get two, yeah. But the end result is predestined.
But like with that illustration, part of the predestination kind of belief or understanding is that like Ben has been predestined to get the invitation, but I haven't. Right? Like that's a piece of predestination.
Yeah, I don't think that's correct.
Right.
Yeah, that can be a piece. That some have gotten the invitation and some haven't. I mean, Jesus is clear, like, I want all people to be saved. I think, I forget the other word that's a little bit dicier, that it doesn't come up. There's predestination and there's, somebody might know anyway. Yeah. Election, yes, thank you, election. And there's another Greek word that's there. Even this story we're going to get into, like Pharaoh hardens his own heart sometimes, but then often God hardens his heart. It's like Pharaoh doesn't have a choice in the matter. I think we have to read that carefully, and we'll try to talk about that next week. But there are verses, Romans 9 to 11, where there's verses that make it seem much more like God is like moving everything like a chessboard. Nobody really has a choice. I don't think that's a very faithful reading. I do think it's mysterious and we can't explain it easily. I think the overall arc of the Bible is a lot of like the end of Joshua. Choose this day whom you will serve. You can choose to submit to God or you can choose to rebel against God.
Well, that great Boyd book,
Yeah.
he talks, I'm reading butcher it,
Yeah.
he was saying that time doesn't affect God because for time to exist, that means things are changing.
Yeah.
Time always, it's changing.
Yeah.
I'm 1 second older than I am by the time I started this sentence.
Yeah.
So God doesn't change. Therefore, time doesn't exist in God.
Right. That God kind of lives outside of time.
So
Yeah.
then he looks at us. There's no time frame when he looks at us.
Yeah. And so I don't remember if Boyd would say like God sees the whole story already played out, or I don't think he would necessarily say that, but yeah, what's God's, it all like can be interesting. It all can make your brain hurt really quickly.
Yeah.
I'm not too interested in it personally. Like you can read a lot about it. I think there's a lot of mystery. I think it is important to talk about though, and I am going to land more and more that into the free will camp, and Greg Boyd will too. Yeah. Yeah, even here, he's like God is like trying to convince Moses to go, right? And then Moses makes excuses, and God makes exceptions, like where it seems like God doesn't have the power to like just move Moses to Egypt to talk to Pharaoh. God's influencing him and trying to woo him, and we'll see like having Aaron come along is a bad decision. Like it becomes it's not good, but God seems much more like a person that's trying to influence versus.
Who's the mother of Aaron?
Yeah, who's the mother of Aaron?
Yeah.
I don't think like one of the questions that Aaron just kind of like shows up out of thin air, right? I would think it's Jochebed. I don't know if the text is not telling us history. It's not trying to give us a play-by-play. It's trying to tell us a story. So as I read it, I don't think it's a question the text is very interested in. Somewhere in Exodus I read today, in Exodus 5 or 6, it tells us Moses' dad and mom. And it might say Aaron's. Verse 20 of chapter 6. Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, who bore him Aaron and Moses. So there you go. It tells us. Amram. Now that's disconcerting too, right? I wrote in my Bible, father's sister, 2 question marks, right? Now I wrote in here, I don't know if I read it somewhere, like I probably just made it up in my mind, but likely a big age gap. Like people had as many kids as they could, so you could have a kid that's, we've seen like 20, 25 years, but yeah, for us that's like, whoa, weird. Yeah. Yeah, well, and kids were you had to have kids to survive, to farm and to feed you. So, but yeah, it's weird that it names that. Again, the text doesn't say if it's good or bad. It could be like, maybe it's kind of saying that because it's not a great thing. I don't know. It's hard to say. But it's Amram and Jochebed. So I guess it does tell us. Doesn't tell us how many other siblings they had. They probably had quite a few. It also says that it probably doesn't say Moses' mom and sister's name right away, because they said another thought is that they were like a caricature for all the women in Egypt. Like you can imagine, every woman and father were trying to save their babies. They were all up to something. They were all going to risk their life to try to save their sons that were born. And so it says maybe they didn't name them as this this was kind of one example of what was happening at that time. Yeah, that's a great question. I I hesitate to say no. I don't remember any parts of the story where they reunite. I don't know. Yeah. Again, the text is, I mean, you would imagine so. It would be, yeah, I think, if you're going to make a movie, that would be a part you would include. Like, yeah. Yeah.
Like singing all the songs, like.
I have not seen that. Yeah, I know. You'd be like, what? In that movie, does Moses meet his parents again?
Have to rewatch it.
The part with the fatted calf or something? Moses' mother gets back into the story?
In Prince of Egypt, in the movie,
Or in the Bible?
or in the Bible.
In the Ten Commandments? Yeah. Okay. That'd be around Exodus 20. Yeah. Oh, the Ten Commandments movie. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it would make sense. Like in the text, it even said, like, God said, I'll send Aaron with you. He's on his way. Like, it seemed like Aaron and probably his mom knew where Moses was living. It seemed like they were in some relation, that he was in hiding. In chapter 15, Moses and Miriam, his sister, sing a song about their victory. So, I think the only way they wouldn't have is if Jochebed died, tragically somehow. But, yeah. I don't know if the text mentions it for sure, but we'll see. We'll read it this week and see if we notice it. So next week we're going to talk about the importance of fire. Fire becomes very important in the story. And we'll talk about why. Fire's already been mentioned a little bit, but it's going to start to be mentioned a lot. So next week I think we'll try to read Exodus 7 to 14. Maybe 15, we'll look. So not too much, 7 more chapters. So, all right, thanks for coming, everybody. No, I really haven't.
And there's Joseph, King of Dreams.
Nope, haven't even heard of that.
So I did a quick bit of research asking how did the daughter know that Moses was